Today, India has over 60 crore OTT users, which is great. I mean, that's a big number. But when you consider total paid OTT subscribers, that number is only around 15 crore. So 1 in 4 basically. Now, even in this 15 crore paid subscriber base, most of them, almost 85%, have got it from their mobile network companies like Airtel or Jio as a bundled service. Which means only around 2 to 2.5 crore Indians actually pay to take an OTT subscription. Now, there are many reasons behind this. Lack of spending power could be one, but one of the major reasons that a lot of people don't pay attention to is the language of the content. See, the majority of India does not speak either Hindi or English. They speak languages like Gujarati, Bhojpuri, Marathi and Haryanvi. But these people have very few options when it comes to OTT in their local language. And that's the gap Stage is trying to solve. It wants to be the go-to option for people who speak in their local language and dialects. And it is already doing it in 3 languages. Today, Stage has over 2 crore users with almost 45 lakh people taking its subscription. And earlier this year, the company raised a $12.5 million funding round, which has valued it at around $100 million. So in this video of Backstage with Millionaires, let's understand how Stage is building a regional OTT platform and what it takes really to compete with the likes of Netflix and Jio Hotstar. And before we start, I want to say that this channel is part of Zerodha's 01 network. If you see how the entertainment has evolved in the last 3 decades in India, in 90s we had Doordarshan or cable networks, which used to have just 2-3 options for channels. Then in 2010s we got DTH with Tata Sky and Dish TV, and this brought hundreds of new channels for movies, sports, news and daily soap operas. But the major change happened in the last decade when internet and smartphone adoption really exploded in India, and it reached to the core grassroots audience in tier 2, 3 and 4 cities. And that gave rise to a new medium where we had access to all sorts of global and local content, and we could stream anything anytime we wanted. And that was OTT, or over the top. Now, OTTs have been around in India at least since 2008 when Reliance Entertainment launched its platform BigFlix. But it was not until 2016-17 that OTT really became common in India. And that was thanks to Netflix and Amazon Prime. These 2 apps saw such a massive response in India that it gave rise to a whole host of national and regional players. So much so that today in 2025, we have dozens of OTT platforms in India targeting different segments and forms of content. Now, let's try to put the OTT landscape of India on a graph. So in the first quadrant, we have global giants like Netflix and Prime focusing on urban audience in metros and tier 1 cities. Next, we have national players like Hotstar, Sony Live and ZEE5, primarily catering to the Hindi audience. Third, we have got regional platforms like Chowpal, Hoichoi and Aha, telling stories in regional languages. And then lastly, there are open OTTs like YouTube and MX Player that offer free ad-supported content. And they don't specifically fall in the subscription-based OTT category as they mostly run on ad-supported model. And all these platforms together make the Indian OTT market worth over 47,000 crores as of 2025, with around 60 crore overall active users. Now, out of the 60 crore, only 10% of the total OTT audience comes from the top 6 metros, but they account for 33% of all the paid subscriptions, which means the other 90% of viewers who come from small towns and rural India are not paying yet for the content. And one of the main reasons for this is because the content doesn't speak to them. And here is what I mean. See, when you divide the Indian audience in terms of the language they speak, less than 50% speak Hindi or English as their first language, which means more than half of the India speaks in their regional languages and dialects. Languages like Gujarati, Punjabi, Bengali and dialects of Hindi like Bhojpuri, Haryanvi and Rajasthani. And you see, most of these people understand Hindi or even English, but this is not their primary language. These are the people who crave content in their own mother tongue because they carry their own humor, their own values and their own way of telling stories. So for example, a Haryanvi story told in pure Haryanvi hits completely different from the same story dubbed into other language. And you can see this in the case of music as well. Until just 10-15 years ago, the market for regional language songs like Haryanvi and even Bhojpuri was very limited. Yes, there were a few local singers who sang songs in their local language, but they did not have enough distribution, and the internet, especially YouTube, solved it. And today, some songs in languages like Haryanvi have hundreds of millions of views, even more than many popular Hindi songs. And this clearly shows that if people get entertainment in their local language and dialects, they would prefer that. And the same thing is now happening in the movie and web series space as well. Until now, the local language movie makers and actors have had very limited options to make movies and also make money from them. But OTT has changed that. As I said, 60 crore Indians now use OTT platforms. And if given a chance, many of them would want to consume movies and shows in their own language and dialects. And this was the big opportunity for local OTT platforms to offer people regional content with micro languages and dialects. This, by the way, is not just the story of India. Globally, emerging markets are seeing the same pattern. In Africa, platforms are now creating content in Swahili dialects and Pidgin English. Then in Latin America, indigenous language content is booming as well. And even in Southeast Asia, hyper-regional platforms are thriving in Indonesia and Philippines. But the Indian market is special in a very unique case, and that is its large scale. So a language like Bhojpuri, for example, is spoken by more than 10 crore people, which is more than the population of countries like UK, Germany, and France. So the opportunity here is much bigger. Okay, I want to take a short break to tell you about Quillbot. So I'm someone who spends 3 to 4 hours writing daily, whether it's an email to my team, scripts for these in-depth case studies or shorts, or even posts for social media. And when you write a lot, sometimes you just run out of the right words and it takes way longer than it should. Or sometimes you're just staring at a blank screen. And that's when Quillbot really helps me. With Quillbot, you can instantly rephrase sentences to sound more professional, creative, or concise. It's like having a second brain for your writing. You can set the tone, check grammar, and even summarize long reports with just one click. And the best part is its browser extension integrates seamlessly with tools like Slack, Notion, Outlook, and more. Also, unlike other AI tools, you don't need to craft new prompts every time. Quillbot gives you quick, efficient edits. So if you are like me and writing is something that's very important for your workflow, I would definitely recommend you check out Quillbot. And thanks to Quillbot for sponsoring this video. And this was the opportunity that was spotted by 4 men in Haryana: Vinay Singhal, Shashank Vaishnav, Praveen Singhal, and Harshmani Tripathi. And they started Stage to solve it. And before starting Stage, the 3 of them had successfully built WittyFeed, which was one of the largest viral content platforms in the world. At its peak, WittyFeed was pulling around 420 million page views every single month. But that business collapsed very tragically. Basically, most of the traffic on their website came from Facebook. And because of some Facebook algorithm change, it disappeared overnight. Now, that was a very big setback. They were making almost $1 million every month in revenue from that business. But when it shut down, the founders did not give up. It actually became a spark for them to build something even bigger. See, thanks to their experience of building WittyFeed, they understood content very well. And this was the year of 2018 when they were figuring out what to do next and what some opportunities were in India's content segment. And they found this opportunity in India's OTT space. See, Vinay, who is from Haryana himself, realized that while people from his home state loved local humor, folk tales, and raw characters, there was no dedicated platform where they could watch movies and other content in Haryanvi. And not just Haryanvi, it was also true for similar dialects like Rajasthani and Bhojpuri. And to fill this gap, the team launched Stage, a hyperlocal OTT platform where people can watch content in their local dialects and language. And they started with Haryanvi because that's one market they understood very well. Now, as soon as they started, they were faced with 3 big challenges. First, how do you prove that there is a real demand for dialect-based content? Next, if there is a demand, how would you make people pay for it when there are already big OTT players? And finally, how would you make quality content that can compete with Netflix and Hotstar's quality? So, the team spent the first 18 months just to validate the idea. Initially, the founders used their personal savings to mentor and onboard local Haryanvi artists and produce simple content formats like comedy specials and folk performances. And they gave it to the audience completely free. And this brought in the first set of users on the platform. Now, once they had the initial users, the team started tracking things like app downloads, retention rate, and early feedback, which gave them insights on how users are interacting with the app and how to further shape the product. And once they were convinced that users were loving their platform and they would pay for it, that's when Stage switched to a paid model. Their initial subscription model was at just 199 rupees for a quarterly plan and only 399 rupees for an annual plan. That's roughly 33 rupees per month. And if you compare that to other mainstream OTTs like Netflix or Prime, they were in the range of 125 to 150 per month. And that's a huge difference for a price-sensitive market like India. Also, they offered a 7-day free trial for just 1 rupee. That's it. And this removed the friction for a large part of the population, which had earlier never taken any paid subscription for any app. And this strategy worked. Within just a few months, Stage was clocking 8,000 to 10,000 monthly subscriptions with a 50% repeat customer rate, which is insanely high for an OTT platform. So now the first 2 challenges were solved. They knew that there is a real demand for it and that people are ready to pay. But now came the bigger challenge, and that was to keep these users and make high quality content. See, making movies or web series is an insanely expensive business. Just signing the actors and location itself takes crores of rupees, and so Stage had to think differently. They started by partnering with small local production houses and individual creators. Also, they had a single POC for each project who's responsible for end-to-end content delivery. Everything from ideation, concept finalization, screenplay, budgeting, casting, and marketing, everything was done in-house by Stage's team. They shot on authentic rural locations, which automatically cut down production expenses. Also, they had small-time crews and basic equipment that kept the overhead costs minimal. So, if you compare Stage's production costs to, say, a Netflix series, you'll see a stark difference. For example, Netflix reportedly spent 100 crore rupees for just one season of Sacred Games back in 2019. Meanwhile, Stage produced a full web series of 7 to 8 episodes of average 30-minute length for just 20 lakh rupees. That's a crazy difference. And it's not like Stage was making bad content. In fact, their focus on story and screenplay was very strong. For example, in December 21, Stage released its first web series called Safe House. It dealt with honor killing, which is often triggered by intercaste marriages. That's a very deep-rooted problem in the society of Haryana, and because the story was so relatable, it drove massive growth for the Stage app in terms of subscribers. Local people in Haryana had earlier not watched such content in their local language, and that made Stage really popular. Now, once Stage had found a product market fit in Haryanvi, they then expanded it to Rajasthani as well. And just this year, they have launched in Bhojpuri too, which is a very smart idea, going really deep into one language and owning it. And now it'll be very easy for them to replicate this idea for other languages as well. Also, there is one thing that often gets overlooked when talking about startups like Stage, and that is that there are many small challenges that you have to solve when you're building a product for an underserved segment. For example, in Stage's case, most of their audience watches their content on mobile phone, and so the company has to film everything keeping that in mind. They've made vertical reel-style content which is swipeable and easy to interact with. Next, the fact that local entertainment industry is broken and unorganized in India, Stage has used it to its benefit. It has made deep relationships with local artists, signing them for multiple series at a time. And it's like they're building creator-led economies in rural India, giving an opportunity to artists who could never think of being watched by crores of audience. And finally, Stage's app is also optimized for the grassroots of Indian audience, with features like low data optimization for people with slow or patchy network. Then they've designed a very simple interface which is easy for first-time OTT users. And finally, they've added social and community features to let users comment, share, and interact around their favorite shows and creators. And thanks to all these efforts, today's Stage has over 2 crore installs and 44 lakh paying households with an annual revenue rate of 180 crore rupees in 2025. And that is massive for a platform that started just 5 years ago, focusing on a single dialect. So in the end, the question is, when many other players who tried building regional content in India failed, what made Stage win? See, one of the common mistakes that many people make while building content solution for Indian audience is to think that Indians don't pay for content and you have to make money from advertisement. But that is completely wrong. Stage has shown that if you give people high quality content consistently, they will pay for it. But with that being said, Stage is still in very early stages. Yes, the company has found a product market fit and is now expanding quickly. But the fact is that it is still a 15 crore rupees per month business, which is not very huge. To build something that can compete with the likes of Netflix and Hotstar, Stage has to grow 20 to 30x from here. And that's not easy while maintaining the content quality and user experience. See, I mentioned earlier how Stage has a 50% repeat customer rate. Well, it's easy to have such figures when your scale is small, but this gets very difficult when you scale and move into newer geography. Also, Stage has proved itself till now in just Haryana, the market they understand. But newer markets like Bhojpuri are completely different, with a different culture and economics. And for Stage to grow, it has to consistently perform in these new markets. According to experts, the customer acquisition cost in India's OTT space is almost 1,000 rupees. And let's say for Stage that number is 600 to 700 rupees, just because they're in a unique market. Still, they have to make that much money from each customer to become profitable. But anyways, I hope the team can solve all these challenges and build India's first truly regional OTT platform. Let me know your thoughts on this Stage's story in the comments. Have you watched any of their content? And if not, what are some things according to you they have to keep in mind to compete with the likes of Netflix? Let me know in the comments and I'll see you in the next one.